I'm joined now from New York by a major critic of Vladimir Putin, the former president of Georgia, Mikheil Saakashvili. Mr. Saakashvili is now a senior advisor to the government of Ukraine. And a very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And first of all, Mr. Saakashvili, your reaction to the killing of Boris Nemtsov, can I ask you, were you surprised that it happened?
Well, I wasn't surprised it happened. I was quite surprised it didn't happen until now. Russia certainly has become a mafia state run by thugs, and that's what mafia states does. It rewards its hitmen, and actually what killed him was the system created by Putin. Putin says things, you know. It's not that you mentioned I'm a critic of Putin, but Putin basically is a guy who at press conferences openly managed to hang me or to kill other people, and then how it comes, you know. I was wondering, you know, how does it happen then? Somehow everybody that crossed Putin's way somehow ended in quite badly, almost everybody. I mean, Anna Politkovskaya, the most prominent Russian journalist, Litvinenko, Boris Berezovsky, certainly Putin hated most of all in Europe, President Kaczynski, and he somehow also was killed in plane crash, also incidentally in Russia. I'm not claiming that all of this was engineered or done personally by Putin. What I'm saying that it's a strange coincidence, a very weird one, that all of his main critics and everybody that crossed his way somehow, almost all of them, finished in this way. And that again resonates with the fact that he really turned Russia into some kind of mafia clan and mafia state.
It does also make us think, doesn't it? And I can see in the monitors behind you, you've got shots of it, as we have, of the people gathering in Moscow to remember Mr. Nemtsov today, how brave in a way they are. And indeed, they're also, as the original protest was meant to be about, concerned about Russia's actions in Ukraine.
Yes, indeed, and that's all interconnected, because I had several conversations with Nemtsov in the last several weeks, and he was very much concerned by the fact that the Russian public was not getting real truth about Ukraine, and he wanted to reach out and to tell them, this is us who is invading Ukraine, this is us who is killing people there, this is us who launched the conflict, us meaning the Russian state, and just telling the truth, because most of the Russians were so much brainwashed by Putin propaganda that they are totally convinced these are Afro-American soldiers running there killing innocent Russians, or some fascists, or this kind of crazy stuff. But it's really Putin somehow got into the heads of many of his compatriots, and basically telling the truth by itself, or stating the facts, has become the act of heroism inside Russia.
And as you say, they're interlinked, these issues. What do you make of the West's response then, since the development of the crisis in Ukraine? What are the mistakes of Western policy, the EU, NATO, the United States? What are the mistakes, and what are the successes, if any?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I was pleased that the UK's Prime Minister, David Cameron, finally said, well, this is not just anything else. This is plainly Russian invasion of Ukraine. And that's what it is, because all the time most of the Western politicians have been trying to replace this by pro-Russian rebels, you know, internal strife, all kind of stuff. And this is exactly the same way how Hitler was invading Sudetenland. Of course, he also had allies inside Czechoslovakia back then, but that does mean that Germany didn't invade Sudetenland. What we have here on the ground is the largest country in the world, Russia, invading the largest country in Europe, Ukraine. And the reality is that, you know, the only real response at this stage, besides the sanctions and beyond sanctions that have already been implemented and that really have made some difference in the initial stage, but the main thing is now to give Ukrainians means to defend themselves, which actually means providing them with defensive weapons, not with kind of weapons with which they can attack or even invade Russia, which of course they are not planning to do, but with something that can stop, the further movement of Russian tanks. For all these years we've been hearing, well, Cold War is over, Russian tanks will never ever advance in Europe. Well, this turned out to be absolutely wishful, this kind of left-wing liberal thinking, because in real terms, here we are. We have tanks advancing deep into Europe, into the largest European country, unchecked. These are the same Russian tanks. This is the same Cold War turning already very hot war. And basically we need to give them weapons. And they're saying, well, you know, if we give them weapons, then it will make Putin even more aggressive. But that's exactly the logic which they've applied to all the aggressors historically, trying to appease them. Appeasement has never worked in history. Appeasement is not going to work this time either. The point is that at a certain point Putin will need to be checked and stopped. The main question will be at what price, at what stage, and will it be at the cost of the whole country disappearing? Will it be at the cost of new people killed like Nemtsov or the others? Or it will be at an earlier stage at lower cost for the West? And I think Putin is the kind of guy who understands the language of strength. He doesn't understand certainly the language of weakness. Weakness invites war, and I think I think there are already people in the West that understand that. But I hope it's not too late until they finally, the United States still start delivering weapons. I mean, I saw UK sending instructors. It's a good sign, but we need much more than that.
But let me ask you about this, Mr. Saakashvili. As you well know, and talking about some of the historical parallels and precedents, as you well know, even if Ukraine were armed to the teeth with the most modern Western weaponry, it couldn't resist a Russian invasion on its own. As you know well from your experience in Georgia, it would take more than that if you really want to stop the appeasement.
Well, Georgia is a very small country. Ukraine has a strategic depth. And the Ukrainians have much more manpower than Georgia ever had. And one thing is clear. If you look carefully whom Russia is sending to the battlefield, first these were North Caucasian Muslims, about which most of mainstream, like mainland Russians, would not care if they had died. Now he ran out of them, and basically he's sending lots of troops from beyond Urals, from Siberia, from Far East, many of them from minorities. He is really very careful not to send many Muscovites and St. Petersburg. There is a very little tolerance in Russia for human casualties. And that's a historic thing, starting from the fact from Afghanistan. Soviet Union was a much larger country than Russia is, so a much more powerful one. But the manpads supplied by Ronald Reagan really reversed the logic of that war and brought the end of the empire. Now we have low oil prices, and if we have combination of this raising costs also on the ground, this can do the trick. So when Georgia was invaded, oil prices was at their height, and Russia, basically Russia had all free way, because most of the other, it was quite a news that it would happen, and people were basically taken by surprise. Now everybody understands what's really going on the ground, and Russia internally is in much worse state than it was in 2008. So there are many things that are different. It's just the issue of whether somebody will have guts to confront them or not, because the point is that it's not about even reversing their. I mean, President Poroshenko is a man of peace. I work with him. I know he's a guy that is interested in settling this. He doesn't want to flare up war. I know it. I mean, he has been a businessman all his life. He has been making deals. He wants to make do compromises. He wants to save whatever his country from the worst. And I know that they really want to have some maneuver to fix the economy, to do the reforms. They don't want further war. But for that, you need minimum protection. What it really amounts to is Western Berlin. Western Berlin was much, much smaller territory than Ukraine. But because the West took political decision to physically protect it, it was somebody like Stalin who was quite worse, even worse than Putin, of course. And then turn into the role model of reform. I think we can do it if we get this minimum checking of the further advances at least. And that's what we basically are asking now, not about major involvement. Nobody is asking for troops on the ground, that's for sure.
So we are out of time. Mr. Saakashvili, thank you very much indeed. Mikheil Saakashvili there.